Mackey and Judd on SKOR North and SKORNorth.com.
And welcome in to the Timberwolves Kool-Aid hot tub. That's right. On this Feedback Friday. Oh, look at us. Declan's gone, so the plane is just kind of flying itself. For the YouTube audience, I'll zoom in on us a little bit more there.
There we go.
Can't promise a smooth ride here with old Macadac producing, but we'll find a way through it. This is Feedback Friday on Mackey and Judd, where we turn the show over to you guys. All your comments, questions, concerns, critiques, you can always hit us up through the SKOR North app, where we will get to as many as we can every single week. We're always following the YouTube comments, and we're always fighting with people on Twitter and being therapists as well. So we got you guys covered. How late were you at the X, by the way, last night?
We did a Judd's hockey show. I was probably there till 11 or so. Not bad. Not bad. But we did a half-hour show. I mean, it's the first win of the season, so you had to talk about it. It was big stuff.
Got to celebrate. Yeah.
Exactly right. So, yeah, it was fun.
So this is going to be kind of a Timberwolves batch here for the first chunk.
Okay.
Timberwolves are 1-0. They'll play their second game on this Friday night here against, I think, a feistier Utah Jazz roster than maybe people thought when they were stripping everything down. They actually have some pretty good players on that team. But Zach Spies says, as I was watching the collapse in that first game, something dawned on me. I am a Packer fan, and Cat reminds me of Aaron Rodgers. When things are going well, he looks like a top 5 player in the league, but as soon as a little adversity hits or defenses start to clamp down, he folds like one of the old newspaper things. As Judd puts it, he's not a winning player, but the other 7-footer Gobert does look like a winning player, constantly getting defensive stops down the stretch, big rebounds, and putbacks. What do you make of this comparison?
Well, first of all, Aaron Rodgers has 3 or 4 MVPs. So it's a little bit difficult because Cat has certainly not achieved that status. He also has a championship, which Cat does not have. But I totally get what he's saying because the current day Aaron Rodgers, when things go wrong, I mean, you can see the shoulder slump. You can see him start to complain and the look, right?
There's some body language stuff with both guys.
So I do think the current day comparison, while the resumes are very different. So just to be clear, I mean, they're not close. I do think the body language, the facial expression, and sort of the attitude comparison right now is good. And with Cat, as I said yesterday, and you guys mocked me, I don't expect him to change completely. But my God, if you're going to play with Gobert, and last year, like him or hate him, Pat Bev knows what Pat Bev wants, and he might be misguided at times. But, I mean, dude, Karl, be a professional. Things are going to go wrong. You're going to get fouled. You're going to it's the NBA. You play 82 games.
Yeah.
And, to see him again with the same stuff. In game 1, Phil, in game 1, we saw some of that. Oh, I can't believe this or I can't believe that. Clean it up a little bit. Is that too much to ask?
No, I mean, you can ask all you want. I don't. Here's where I'm at with this. This is a really interesting comparison. No, Cat hasn't won any MVPs, but he is a top 5 skill set potentially in the NBA. How many guys who are, first of all, he's the greatest shooting 7-footer in the league's history. Just period.
George Mikan was pretty good.
From inside 6 feet.
I don't even know he was 7 feet.
Underhand.
I just wanted to say George Mikan.
He is a great shooter.
Yes. He's
a good rebounder. He's a good passer. He can dribble drive from the top of the key. He has some defensive skills, but they haven't all translated necessarily. I'm not saying he's a perfect player or that he's Giannis or something, but
right.
But in terms of like what he can do at 7 feet tall, I don't know that you can name definitively 5 or 6 more just talented players in the league. And Aaron Rodgers, the mobility is not quite what it was, but for a long time it was like howitzer for an arm, accuracy, weird arm angle throws, mobility, all these things.
Yep.
And once the Packers got out to a lead, it was just an avalanche of unstoppable offense. And the Timberwolves have been that way too. You get out to a lead, things are going well. Like Cat is dropping 27 and 14 rebounds and threes and all this stuff. But once the Packers get punched in the mouth, once the referees start making some bad calls or the game starts to go the other way, Aaron is not as much of a foxhole guy as maybe Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or Josh. Well, Josh Allen has some issues with like deficits too, but Cat's kind of the same way through his career where, all right, Memphis is coming back. They're punching you in the mouth. There's a bad call by an official. Can you block it all out and be zen and be a cyborg? Kevin, I keep going back to Kevin Garnett, the greatest player in Wolves history. He was a highly emotional player, but he didn't get taken out of games emotionally like Karl-Anthony Towns does. He channeled emotions like a cyborg, dude. Like he knew when it was time to go to the dark place in a game and just be hyper-focused and play lockdown clamps defense or not complain to an official or whatever, right? He had this way of going into stoic mode. And Cat needs that switch that he can flip where he's not being affected. Like he is allowing external things to impact the way that he operates too often. And Rodgers kind of does the same thing. So I don't hate this comparison.
I don't hate it. I just don't want to compare him like as far as successes go because, Rodgers the comparison is that the guy has a Super Bowl, multiple MVPs. But you know what I just want Cat to do? I just want Cat to, and I don't think there's too much to ask, button it up. So KG had the ability, and look, people followed him. Like it was people felt accountable to Kevin, which was great. He was a captain type. Karl's never going to be that guy. Like no one's ever going to feel really truly accountable to Karl. And when Karl tries to be a captain type, it comes off Cousins-like. Like the thing I like about Kirk right now is Kirk's just being Kirk. Kirk's like, you know what? I'm cool being Kirk. And there's times where Karl still tries to like be the guy. And it's like, dude, you're a great player. You're not the guy as far as how you are wired. But I just want him to button it up so that when things go wrong, he is not exuding a negative influence, which is how I feel when his reaction is, what? How can you not go? That to me, there's no upside to that. It's not like his teammates are like, there goes Karl. It's like, there goes Karl again. So I just want him to button it up, accept who he is, and try not to have a negative energy that permeates the team. Because I really think in the playoff series at times, he did that. He let off an energy that I thought was very counterproductive to a playoff atmosphere.
And it's only been one game, but I think Gobert's energy kind of balanced out Cat in that game too, where Cat was
very possible. And
some of it too is like it's exacerbated, I think, by him just being behind in basketball conditioning now because of the hospital thing, and it's like him shooting 2 for 10 or whatever it was probably leads into the frustration, the complaint, because now and then he starts to force a couple drives or kick his leg out on a 3-pointer. He's got to rein that stuff in, but it feels like Gobert is out there as this kind of wise old sage veteran now, and you saw a couple different times in that game where Gobert would, him and Cat would be interacting on the bench, and it was Gobert dictating to Cat, hey, here's how we need to play this defensively, and there'd be some by-play back and forth. So I think Gobert's energy might be able to balance out Cat a little bit. I'm not going to expect Cat to be someone that he isn't, but I think you just nailed it. Can they get to a point with everything building this chemistry with his team so that Cat's negative energy or frenetic energy sometimes isn't shipwrecking a game or shipwrecking a series like it did against Memphis? Right.
It's not impacting the rest of the team. And I think that they can. And Gobert is going to be good there. But the other thing with Karl that's going to be so intriguing now too is, in my opinion, in watching Gobert play offensively, he's going to be more important here than he was with the Jazz. But that being said, he's going to ask to do what he does well: defend, play inside. So it's going to be Cat who has to adjust things. And Chris Finch and the Timberwolves and their fan base, Phil, need Cat to be comfortable doing that. This can't be this whole, in game 13, this isn't working. I mean, that's where I can see Cat internally going. And I mean, this is going to take time. And everybody, it's just like with Kirk and O'Connell. Like this isn't we all think, oh my God, you're going to put these two together. It's going to be fantastic. And it might be eventually, but we don't know how it's going to work. And it's going to be a bumpy ride at times. And Karl, some of his passes in the opener were fantastic, but there were clearly some things that he's not comfortable yet, either because of health or his role being changed. So like he needs to be able to accept the fact that he needs to be comfortable with the fact that there's going to be some rocky spots here that aren't going to work out perfect without making it a bigger deal than it is.
Somebody because Cat put out a picture of his uniform, the white uniform, after the game on Instagram, and it was like all these spots of, was it blood? It was weird.
Yeah, it was spots of something. It looked like dirt, but it was probably blood.
But it was like everywhere on his uniform, and I didn't. I usually they would make you change your jersey if there was like that much blood, but.
True.
I think he was trying to say like, hey, this is how much contact I took last night. And someone, sent me the tweet and said, you need to back off. Like, this is why Cat complains to officials. I said, listen, bad calls are going to happen. The game is going to be physical. Other teams are going to make runs. It's not unique to the Timberwolves or Cat. What is unique is how you react to the adversity that's happening. Basketball and the NBA are hard. It's going to be hard. You get to choose how you react to the hard. And that's been my criticism of Karl-Anthony Towns. Hopefully he can rein some of it in.
Yes. And the one thing that I hope he watched, like if Cat took anything from game one, it's this. Gobert knocked knees, and it clearly hurt like hell, with an OKC player. He was down. They got him up, and he hobbled down the floor and basically played it off, okay? If that's Cat, we get the entire Cat experience, right? The rolling around on the floor, and you're like, oh my God, he's really hurt. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've seen this. I love the fact that Gobert, I don't like the fact he was hurt, but I love the fact that he got himself up, hobbled down the floor, and kept playing. And then in the third quarter, clearly still slightly hobbled, got that steal and that basket to end the quarter. That's what I hope Cat watch. But I mean, that's what I want Cat to watch and be like, dude, you're a big man. You're going to take contact. It's going to hurt. What I don't want to see you doing is writhing around on the damn floor unless you're truly hurt. Gobert got himself up, and I thought really showed something there.
Mitch Rand chimes in here via the SKOR North app. It seems like the only thing we lost in the Gobert trade is a hype man in Pat Bev. He was mic'd up last night on TNT too. Just
how was it?
It was fun. Like he's really entertaining when he's mic'd up, and I think he did a good job helping bring the Lakers back in that game with just like helping with their defense. But ultimately, that team is such a train wreck. Russell Westbrook went 0 for 11 in that game last night.
I saw it.
God. With that being said, on Pat Bev, I still think the Wolves will go 6-1 in October. We will win against the Lakers, but we are going to lose to the Spurs once because we won't take them seriously. Looking forward to the season and listening to you guys throughout. On his like losing Pat Bev as the hype man, I think now that we've kind of seen the offseason and some preseason games in the first game, I'm less worried about the loss of Pat Bev's leadership or attitude, if you will. Now that we know, okay, Austin Rivers, maybe these guys aren't as demonstrative as Pat Bev,
right?
And they're not getting into guys and every time out. But like Austin Rivers has been around the block in the NBA. He's the longest tenured veteran on this team, 10-year veteran in the league. Rudy Gobert might not be the most vocal guy, but he's been in the league for 9 years. He knows what he's doing. He can help dictate during huddles and things like that.
Yep.
Taurean Prince is a respected and quality veteran player. Kyle Anderson, same thing. Bryn Forbes has been around for 6 years. Like, I don't know that they replaced Pat Bev 1 for 1 because you aren't. But I do feel like they have enough leadership infrastructure here on this team so that things aren't just going to be rudderless.
So I disagree with Royce on his contention that he basically hates Pat Bev. I thought Pat Bev
was valuable. Absolutely.
I thought Pat Bev last year brought a lot. Pat Bev is also a shelf life guy, which means that you know what? He probably could have stuck around this season, but by next year, the act would be old. I sense just from, and it's one game, so I might be totally wrong here. Old takes exposed if I am. But I sensed that Gobert has sort of that captain's presence about him. So like in watching him sort of lead and talk and play and how he handled himself, I think he's got the presence to be like the captain. And the spark eventually should come, like if you need that Pat Bev spark, should come from Ant, right? So like I am all for this. I am all for taking any potential leadership off Cat's plate. I don't think he has it. I just don't. Like we've seen it a lot, and I don't think he does. But I think that the combination of Ant going ascending, and he's definitely a demonstrative dude, and Gobert's sort of quiet but big time presence, I think they're fine.
There's two very different types of leadership in the NBA. There's the vocal leadership that guys like Pat Bev provide or whoever, and sometimes it comes from superstars. But then there's just like do the right thing on the court leadership. Mm-hmm. And they have a couple of Jaden McDaniels is never going to be the vocal leader guy this season, but Jaden McDaniels is a go do the right thing on the court. Go tip a pass, go get a steal, go get a rebound, get to the free throw line.
He's in the corners. He digs the puck out.
Yep. They actually have, like, when you start to look at this roster on paper,
yep,
and it's probably 2 months away from gelling, they've got some star, like, bucket creators. They've got a couple big-time shooters, Karl-Anthony Towns being the number one. They've got an elite defensive presence in Gobert, but then they also have, like, Gobert is also kind of a greasy, grimy, do the little things player.
And he can score. Yeah.
Jalen Noel can come in and just like, all right, our offense is sputtering. Just put Jalen in there for 7 minutes and go get 13 points.
Yes.
There's so many components to this team. Taurean Prince can just go off for 3 3-pointers and a half or something, right?
And I think they're well coached too, which helps a ton.
Yes.
Gerson, man. Gerson did some good things. There's no denying it. Gerson did some good things. Yeah. Chris Finch was among them.
Let's see here. Derek Anderson says, isn't it ridiculous the national media literally takes a huge, gigantic crap on the Wolves at all possible times by acting like we don't exist? Just watch the national media NBA preview show this week where they did their picks for just the conference finals and finals, and the Wolves weren't even thought about or mentioned, let alone debated about to get to the Western Conference Finals. All I'm saying is, if there's a year that logically the Wolves should get some hype and fans should be excited, it's this year, probably more than any season in franchise history. What do you guys think? I am not going to get mad about the national media not shining a spotlight on this team. This franchise doesn't deserve anything until they earn it.
Right.
And to this point, they've given the national media and fans no reason to think that they should be taken seriously until they do it. I'd rather this team prove it and stay under the radar. And all of a sudden you look up in January and like, wow, the Wolves are the 2 seed? That's crazy. Okay. They don't deserve anything yet. They haven't done anything yet, and I'm fine with that.
If they're not mentioned by the national people next season, something's gone wrong. Like that's when you're going to get, right now, they don't deserve a thing. They don't deserve a thing, but they need to earn that respect. Like I don't want a bunch of like, well, they're still trying to learn. It's going to take some time for the chemistry, especially with Cat and D'Lo and Gobert and all of that to develop. But next season, I think, is the goal for the Wolves being on the map. And until then, prove it. Just prove something. Like you went out in the first round against the Grizz. You could have beat them.
You should have beat them.
The Grizzlies were there for the taking.
Absolutely should have beat the Grizzlies. Yep. Yeah, go and they'll prove it on the court or they won't. I'm not going to get too worried about like what they're saying in the previews. This is more about just like the show and parents. So we now are with Declan. We're now 0 for 6 on biological parents here, with my dad passing away earlier this week. Dan Freeberg says the way you guys have described your relationship and the Minnesota sports that you've gone through reminds me, he's talking about me and my dad, I guess, reminds me so much of my relationship with my father. We had season tickets from 1996 until 2010 and still attend games regularly. I think about how awesome those days were when it was just him and I driving from Sioux Falls to Minneapolis, hanging out, eating in bars, learning how to sports bet from him. Something that you don't really put into perspective until you are older. I just turned 30, and now I feel as though my dad and I are just starting to really become friends as well as father and son. I just want to say again, thanks for the daily entertainment for Minnesota sports, and again, sorry for your loss. I was talking with to my wife about this a couple nights ago, where it's so tough because you can't, you don't really appreciate your parents until you're probably in your 30s. So your timeline for appreciating your parents doesn't start for like 3 decades. Then it's like you're 32 or 35. You're like, oh man, you know what? My parents gave up a lot to go to my games, or, maybe my parents weren't so annoying when I was 16. Maybe I was the one that should have pumped the brakes. And then once you start to appreciate your parents, now their clock is ticking.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in my case, both my parents are gone by the time I'm 37 years old. But it's like, did you ever have a moment where you thought when you were a little bit older, oh, I'm like 42 now, or I'm like 35, and I kind of understand this about my parents. It only took me decades to get there.
Yes, definitely. This is such a difficult, in-depth conversation, but yes, I definitely did. And part of it too is because when you're a kid and you're young, before you become a snot-nosed teenager, you think to yourself that your parents are perfect. And then you find out they're far from perfect. And then there's that.
And then you're annoyed by that
and
for
then
like
you're
15
annoyed,
years.
Yeah. And then and then you realize eventually, like where this person is, that they're far from perfect, but they did a lot of things that were sacrifices. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing. I don't know there's a lot of changing it though, because it's just life's evolution in some ways. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be nice, but I am saying I think there's a lot of people that regret things they don't need to regret.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think regret does you much good unless it's really substantiated by your actions. And being a normal kid and young adult is not like a sin. It's not the worst thing. So I think that a lot of people miss their parents and go around. The one thing I will say is this, and I think you can identify too. Now, Declan lost his parents young, which is a whole different ballgame. I can't speak to that. That would be brutal. But I think the one thing that, I also came to the conclusion of is a lot of people miss their parents a lot, which I appreciate and I get. But, by the time my parents passed, they were both very old and frail, and just to flat out call a spade, they weren't the people that I knew as my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't identify when my parents died. I don't see that as, I don't think, boy, I wish I could go talk to my mom as she was right before she died.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't that person. Now, do I wish that I could go back to being young Judd? I guess if I think about it, maybe at times. But then that gets really convoluted because I like where I am now. I think the most important thing is live in the moment, enjoy it, and don't regret things that you really probably shouldn't regret.
I actually needed to hear that because I've spent a lot of time this week thinking back, like, God, I always was annoyed at my dad about this when I was in my teens or 20s, or like dismissed him for certain things. But like, how many 17-year-olds or 21-year-olds or 13-year-olds are emotionally intelligent and have enough perspective enough to like still accept their parents' flaws for what they are? You go, like you said, you go through a phase where you think your parents are superheroes, and then you realize that they're not, and then you get annoyed by them at times. And I think this week I've been stuck in God, I wish I wouldn't have been annoyed by this, but I don't know.
But I mean, that was a different stage though. And I think part of the thing, so I don't think we think about this because it's probably deep down, but I think part of the thing too is when you get to the stage that you realize your parents weren't perfect and they annoy you, you're mad at yourself as well. Mm-hmm. So like, there's just a lot of very deep things. Life is difficult enough without making it more difficult, which we all, including myself, do.
Yep. Yeah. And for my dad too, he was very much, he was old and then he was 80, but he was kind of 80 going on 90 physically in a lot of ways with like cancer and stuff. And so
my parents were like that too. Yeah.
When my mom died, she was 61 going on 48.
Yeah.
And it was just a totally different
That's
scenario.
A different ball game. That I did not go through that. And so that's a different ball game. But I'm just saying, when they get to a point where they're frail and they're older, those aren't the people. And it's not that you don't love them, but those weren't the people that you knew. And in some ways, when my parents both passed, I was thankful because they were out of pain and a life that, at some point in time is going to expire. And if it's not quality, really, what's the point?
Yeah. So I don't know. We've become kind of the deceased parents club here on Mackey and Judd. So if you've gone through similar loss or are on the verge of it, just know that we're here for you. We're probably going to be talking about the Vikings and the Timberwolves and the Wild and stuff, but you can always hit us up.
Yeah, we talk about the important stuff in life.
Yeah, email us. It's not going to turn into a daily grief therapy show or anything, but yeah, we feel you guys. We've been through it.